Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, thanks for joining us once again. It's a Tuesday night, and we got a lot on the docket tonight. Let's start at the end. Don't forget, it's open phones. The text line is open. The phone lines are open. And Jeffrey Epstein those files and that story is all over the place. And we can get into that, too, if we want to, in hour number 3. The phone lines and the text lines will be open. In hour number 2, punch up the pillow and kick back. We're going to talk with an author, Alex Wellerstein, who has written a book about the bomb, Harry Truman, and the reasons behind it, and what are the rumors, what was really happening. And so we take a look at the atomic bomb and the dropping of those 2 bombs in a brand new book. A fascinating conversation coming up with him. In this hour, in hour number 1, in the second half of this hour, we're going to talk to the director of the Rice Space Institute, Dr. David Alexander. They put the Artemis II on hold today. They did a wet test earlier in the week, and they found some leaks, so they pushed it off to March. But we'll get a chance to talk with Dr. David Alexander, who knows about as much of this Artemis launch as the astronauts that are getting ready to sit in the rocket ship. So we'll do that a little bit later on this hour. This first hour, though, I know everyone heard about this special election in Texas, this state race in which the Democrat beat the Republican by 14 points after Trump won that district by 17 points. Ron DeSantis, Republican from Florida, saying this is a dangerous situation. A lot of others saying this is dangerous for the Republicans. I'm not so sure. I think that's a lot of wishful thinking on a lot of people's parts. But we're going to talk to a columnist from the Houston Chronicle who is following this very closely, Chris Tomlinson. We were going to talk with him next. Stay right there. America at Night, just getting started.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, since the election in which the Democrats had no chance, Republicans cleaned up, sweeping the Senate, the House, and, of course, the presidency, the Democrats have been winning in some of these mid-term elections. And now comes word in Texas, in North Texas, a seat that hasn't been Democratic in 45 years. A Democrat beat a Republican by 14 points. Trump won that district by 17. A lot of people are saying this is a canary in the coal mine for Republicans. Not so fast. Let's find out what's going on. Our guest this half hour is a man who knows a thing or two about a thing or two. He is the columnist for the Houston Chronicle and the San Antonio Express News. Chris Tomlinson, thanks for joining us here on America at Night.
Well, thanks for having me on.
First off, it was a midterm election. It was a weekend. Was there a storm going on? I know a lot of people are saying the storm kept people away. What were the conditions for the race on Saturday?
We had an ice storm for the last half of the early voting, and in Texas, about half the electorate comes out for early voting. So, undoubtedly, the sleet and the ice kept people in.
And so midterm elections, it's really not a fair comparison between a general election. Do you agree, or are special elections special in Texas?
You know, I think this is not only unusual because it's a special election. This was a runoff from a special election. So there was no other voting going on this day. This was the only race on the ballot, the only thing to come out for, and clearly 85% of the electorate did not show up.
And these two Republicans and Democrats are going to face off again at the next year, right, for the full term of the seat.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, it's the new term. You know, this weekend's election was to fulfill the rest of the current term. Then it'll be a new 6-year term beginning in the next year.
Yeah. So Ron DeSantis, a Republican from Florida, he's said, "Oh my goodness, this is trouble." A lot of national media is pointing to this. I know there's a lot of hype. I know there's a lot of wanting and wishing. But Chris Tomlinson, columnist for the Houston Chronicle, does this special election in Texas really tell us anything?
It does. I think it's being overblown. I think the Democrats are a little too excited. I think the Republicans are using it as a way to fundraise and to create a panic. But on the margins, there's some real difference here. We know that the Latino areas that were going for Trump before went for the Democrat. We also know that the moderates, the non-committed voter, they also went for the Democrat. But the Republicans, they held their own. There wasn't that much party switching. So if you're a Democrat, you should be excited that you might win on the margins. You might win more of the Latino vote, but it's not a really big deal.
The Latino vote in Texas, even though Trump did very well with Latinos because of all the things that are going on, is he losing some of that support? What's the story on the ground in Texas?
Undoubtedly. The Latino voters went for Trump because they were expecting him to turn around the economy. They were hoping to see the economy that came out of the pandemic. They were not voting for the culture war. They were certainly not voting for this kind of war on immigration.
What about the farmers? What about the ranchers, the ones who are taking direct hits when it comes to these tariffs that he's imposing?
Well, this race was in an urban area, so I think we didn't see much from them. What I'm hearing from my readers, from people that I talk to, is that while they are very disappointed with Trump, they're not giving up on him quite yet.
Yeah. Let's turn to the Senate race, because this one is really starting to shape up. John Cornyn going for a fifth term. Before he takes on the Democrat, he's got to get through the Republican primary. And from all indications, he's got a fight on his hands.
Texas has got two of the most exciting races in the country this year. As you said, John Cornyn is fighting for his political life. This is the most difficult race he's ever run. And it's because he has said less than nice things about President Trump in the past. But he's also running against a very flawed Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who has been indicted for felonies. He struck a plea deal. He was impeached by the Texas House, only to be acquitted by the Texas Senate on bribery charges. He comes with a lot of baggage, but he comes with a lot of, frankly, Christian nationalist money. And that's what's put him in the lead for now, and we'll see if he holds on to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Baggage used to be a bad thing in politics. Now it turns out, I guess, to be a good thing. Doesn't Ken Paxton also have a divorce on his hands, or his wife was somewhat vocal in criticizing him?
Yes, his wife, who was a state senator, filling the seat that he vacated when he became Attorney General, announced on Twitter, that also known as X, that she was divorcing him on biblical grounds. We have since learned that he's had several affairs, and it's something he doesn't like to talk about. But I do believe it's hurting him, particularly with Republican women.
Interesting. The last check of the polls, it seems like they're running neck and neck, and this thing might just come down to the wire, no?
Undoubtedly. I frankly think that Paxton's lead is overblown. The incumbency comes with a lot of power, and I'm just not sure that when Republicans enter the voting booth beginning next week with early voting, that they're gonna go with the MAGA candidate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the Democrats are rooting for Ken Paxton, and the MAGA group is rooting for Ken Paxton. So at least they're on the same side in the primary. Let's turn to the Democrats. Jasmine Crockett is, I guess, been district out of her House seat, and so she's decided to jump into the Senate race. You've had some jockeying there. What's the latest on the Democratic side?
She's up against State Representative James Tallarico, who's from the Austin area. And really, there's not a lot that separates them on policy. It's all about style. She's the street fighter, the MMA fighter. She goes toe to toe with the insults and the sharp jabs. Tallarico is a seminarian, Presbyterian, also very progressive. But he sounds more like a youth pastor than a modern day politician. So it's really two different styles, and Texas Democrats have a tough choice.
Yeah, she's very much in the face, right, of MAGA. We see her, on TV with the House hearings and everything. She's sort of in your face, very bombastic. He's much more reserved. Does that help her in the primary, hurt her in the general?
The polls have been all over the place. The Republicans really want to run against Crockett. They think she'll be an easy win for either Cornyn or Paxton. It's the same way that the Democrats really want to run against Paxton because Cornyn would be tougher to beat. Tallarico is a white man Christian who may be able to turn a few Republican heads. But frankly, I think either one of them could beat Paxton, and I think probably both of them would lose against Cornyn.
Yeah, I think that is the conventional wisdom, but we'll see how this Cornyn-Ken Paxton race shapes up. Has Donald Trump weighed in on Cornyn or Paxton as of yet?
We are waiting with bated breath. Cornyn's people keep saying that any day now the president will weigh in. Yesterday, when he was doing a gaggle in the White House, Trump suggested that he might decide to weigh in on the Cornyn-Paxton race. It will be fascinating to see who he chooses. The MAGA stalwart who defended him when he was trying to overthrow the election, or frankly, the established Republican who's probably got a better chance of winning.
Yeah, though, as much as Donald Trump is he's smart enough not to fall into that trap, he just might end up endorsing both of them and or neither of them at the same time, right? He'll do everything for everybody, and so you sort of leave everybody holding the bag.
Well, when his candidate lost the Senate district this past weekend after he put out 3 tweets calling on Republicans to vote for her, he's forgotten her name. So, we'll see.
Chris Tomlinson, our guest columnist for the Houston Chronicle and the San Antonio Express News, has got his finger on the pulse of what's going on in Texas. Hey, while we have you, I got a couple minutes left. Give me a sense of the argument or the debate going on in Texas when it comes to data centers. Are they having a devil of a time down in Texas as opposed to other parts of the country? What's the conversation about data centers going on down in Houston and or Texas?
It is all about the price of electricity. We have a competitive wholesale electricity market, so the more demand goes up, the more the price goes up, which means the more homeowners have to pay for their electricity. We've had a couple of near misses with blackouts over the last 5 years. So most of the opposition to the data centers is about how they will they will cause the price of electricity to go up and possibly cause a blackout in extreme conditions. So right now, it's not real positive.
And so, in other parts of the country, I know the opposition has the liberals and the conservatives have sort of come together and have beaten back some data center projects and put them on hold and moratoriums and things like that. Similar story down in Texas?
We haven't seen a political divide on this. I mean, I think it's kind of a populist versus the billionaires vibe that I'm getting. The governor, Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, they have taken a lot of money from the data center people. They've been big advocates. While they haven't turned on the data centers yet, they're certainly being a lot quieter. And they're beginning to say things like what Donald Trump, frankly, has said, which is if you want to build a data center, you need to bring your own electricity. You can't tap into the grid and take electricity from my grandma and grandpa.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate, one in which I think is going to be front and center when we come to the election coming up here. Chris Tomlinson, columnist at the Houston Chronicle and the San Antonio Express News, one of the best in the business in Houston, and nice enough to spend a couple minutes with us. Chris, thanks for checking in. Good luck down the road, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks. Anytime. Take care.
You got it. Chris Tomlinson with us, columnist for the Houston Chronicle. I tell you what, that is going to shape up to be a pretty interesting race. I see. I. That's why you go and talk to people on the ground, because the special election where this Democrat won by 14 points, it's a mirage. Democrats are somehow hoping and praying that is a harbinger of things to come. I don't see it. These special elections, they're too local. They're too many variables. It's just it's too much wishful thinking. It's too much wanting and hoping and wishing. This Democrat beat this Republican by 14 points. Trump won the district by 17. Well, you talked to Chris Tomlinson. Well, there was an ice storm, so that cut down on a lot of early voting. A lot of early voting, which Donald Trump doesn't like, but really would have helped the Republican. It was a special election for a special election. What does that mean? Well, they were filling the seat to fill out the term. So they're going to have to do it all again. It was on a Saturday, and this was the only ballot. This is the only race on the ballot. So it was a niche of a niche of a niche. And so, yeah, Democrats came out. What did he say? 85% of the people didn't vote in this election. So it was a red herring. It was a one-off. It was just no connection, no correlation between some crystal ball to find out, oh, my goodness, this is an harbinger of things to come. Republicans are in trouble. They might be, but I don't think you can point to this Texas seat as the reason why they're in trouble. I thought it was an interesting conversation, if I do say so myself, pat myself on the back. All right, stay right there. The Artemis II was supposed to launch on Friday. Then they pushed it back to Monday and Tuesday. Then they had a wet test, found a bunch of leaks, so they pushed it back to March. We're going to check in with Dr. David Alexander, who is the director of the Rice Space Institute, knows quite a bit about this launch. We'll find out what happened today and give us a primer on what to expect come March when the U.S. sends astronauts back to the moon for the first time since the early 1970s. And then next hour, we are going to talk to an author who has taken an interesting look at the United States dropping the atomic bomb, the why, the how, the what, the who. All of that coming up here, America at Night. Back in a moment.
You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Relax. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Well, they delayed the launch. It was supposed to be this Sunday. It was a busy Sunday. It was going to be the Olympics, the Super Bowl, and a launch to the moon. They pushed it back to sometime in March. Americans going back to the moon, at least doing a flyby this go-around. We're going to talk to Dr. David Alexander. He serves as the director of the Rice Space Institute and a man who knows quite a bit about the Artemis II and the launch. Doctor, thanks for joining us here on America at Night.
Thank you for having me.
What happened today?
Well, they always have to prepare because safety is the most important thing, and so they do a wet rehearsal. And, it's a complicated machine, and there was a few leaks. And so rather than the leaks were fairly minor, as I understand it, and so they were not overly concerned, but they wanted to make sure they understood the root cause of the problem before the committee. There's obviously going to be people on board, so it's really important to be as safe as possible. And so they always said this is a contingency. They have a couple of launch windows in the next couple of months, and so hopefully they'll make the next one and they'll have resolved some of these problems.
Yeah, sure. Was it anything to do with the ice storm or the cold weather? Could that have sort of affected some of this as well?
No, I mean, I think they obviously prepared for that because the original wet rehearsal was supposed to, I think, start on Friday, maybe Saturday, and they moved it to Monday because of the cold weather. So they were well aware of the conditions. And so, again, they monitor everything they possibly can. And this is not the first thing that I was actually at the first launch attempt for Artemis I, the previous mission. And it didn't, again, we stayed up all night. It didn't go that day, and we had to wait for 3 or 4 more days before the actual launch took off. So this is not uncommon.
Yeah. Let's talk about, a lot of people remember the Apollo missions, but the Artemis missions is new and different. How is this different than the Apollo era missions?
Well, the main thing is the purpose and the way we do space these days when it comes to commercial entities, and we can maybe talk more about that if you're interested. But obviously, in the Apollo days, there was a big push to beat the Soviet Union. It was about the technological prowess of two different kind of ideologies. And of course, President Kennedy gave his famous speech committing the nation to get to the moon. He gave that to Rice University, where I have the privilege to be a professor now. And that set up a whole slew of activity. The budget, the share of the budget, the U.S. budget at the time was about 4.5%, and it was all guns blazing to beat the Soviet Union. And the good thing that happened there was it really pushed the innovation, it pushed the engineering and science. I would argue led the U.S. economy to be the strongest in the world. Because not so much because we went to space, but because that drive and the excitement of it led people into the sciences, into engineering fields, and so on. The Artemis program, we haven't been back to the moon obviously since 1972, and if it was all about being first, we've already done it. But this is really about creating that next step. If you think about the American history and the Lewis and Clark missions, they went to explore the frontier. And very quickly after that, the commercial entities, cities grew up and all these different things. This is what's happening in space now. And so NASA has helped build the economy around low Earth orbit, satellites, GPS, all those things we're used to. And now they're taking that next step into moving a little bit further afield. And so the Artemis program is not just about getting there, putting a flag in the ground and coming home, but it's actually to create a sustainable presence for the U.S. and its international partners on the moon and at the moon, and for a couple of reasons: to support space in low Earth orbit, and then also to pave the way for going to Mars eventually.
How much of this Artemis II and this whole project is commercial, and how much of it is NASA?
Well, the Artemis mission is mostly NASA. Obviously, the people who build the machines are companies, U.S. companies here on the ground. But this particular mission is NASA, but the support structure and the supply chain around this push to the moon comes from commercial entities. Intuitive Machines here in Houston and Firefly in Austin landed commercial payloads on the moon. Intuitive Machines had a little issue with their landings. But that's setting up, those are payloads that they'll be taken to the moon for various companies, whether it be NASA or other customers. But they're also providing that infrastructure so that when NASA goes with the astronauts to land on the moon, or when they need the communications from lunar orbit, those are entities that are being built by commercial companies around the country. They're getting a lot of support from NASA, of course, the federal government, but they are the way that NASA does these contracts now is very different from what it used to be. And that's allowing the companies to sell any additional space they have for a payload or for potentially for an astronaut on their machine, whether it be the capsule or if it's a lander where they can have a rover or some other science experiments. So it's a very different way of operating now. And of course, NASA's budget is a fraction in terms of the GDP compared to what it was in the 60s. I think it's less than half of 1% now.
Dr. David Alexander with us, a professor at Rice University, director of the Rice Space Institute. So this trip to the moon, they're going to do a flyby. They're going to go to the backside of the moon. What's the goal of this? Are they going to be scouting places to land? What's the idea behind this trip?
Yeah, I think you hit, one part of it. You know, the key thing is, it's obviously, we think that we did it before, therefore it's easy to do again, but it's not that easy to land on the moon. And what this is doing, the first Artemis mission tested the systems without the additional concern about having humans on board. So the Artemis I mission and the Orion capsule flew around the moon in this roughly the same trajectory as the Artemis II will go on, and it allowed them to check out the systems, and in particularly check out the re-entry. That's a real challenge when you're coming back from the moon, is being able to control that re-entry. Now the step up is the complexity is those humans on board. Humans are notoriously difficult things to keep safe. And so this mission is doing the same, but it's allowing them to test out the human systems with humans on board. It's allowing them to test comms. It's allowing them to, as you mentioned, to do some reconnaissance as to landing sites. And this is one of the other things I forgot to mention. In Apollo, the key thing was to get to, they landed essentially near the equator of the moon where they could have ready communications with the Earth. Now we're really targeting the South Pole. And for various reasons, if you're interested, we can talk about later. But landing at the South Pole, and so that's a kind of more treacherous terrain, if you like. And so being able to know as much as we can about the region to pick the right landing site, so that when we actually do Artemis III and land the astronauts on the surface, they'll have as much information as they need to make it as safe as possible.
Why the South Pole? What's so special about the South Pole?
I'm glad you asked. I let you into it. But, well, the South Pole, if we're going to be there as a sustainable presence, we're going to need, we can't keep taking stuff with us. And so there's a thing called, NASA uses called in situ resource utilization, which in a crude way is living off the land. Now, Matt Damon's already showed how we do it on Mars, right? You grow potatoes, but the key thing about the South Pole is just because of the way the moon is oriented in terms of its rotational orbit and where the sun is, there are places in the South Pole at the tops of ridges of craters that are almost entirely in sunlight. I don't know if you know, but the moon's day-night cycle is a 2-week cycle. So it's 2 weeks of night and 2 weeks of day. That's very, very challenging when it comes to keeping your batteries alive when it's completely dark. The temperatures are minus 200 degrees, all these different things that make it complicated. So we need power to operate our machines. And so if you're in that region where you get 97% of the time you're in sunlight, then that helps you with your power systems. And so you can operate your habitats, your rovers, and your landers, all those different things. But the other really interesting thing is that because of that kind of angle of the sun, there are places at the bottom of some craters, the big one is Shackleton Crater, that have never seen sunlight. Which means, and we know there's we know there's water on the moon. And so those regions that have never seen sunlight potentially have vast reservoirs of frozen water ice. And water, of course, is good for humans. Water is hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen is also good for humans. But hydrogen and oxygen are essentially rocket fuel. So one of the ways that we can do the commercial side of thing is by extracting that water, making it hydrogen and oxygen, which is not that difficult, and then flying some of that back to low Earth orbit for things like refueling spacecraft so we don't constantly have to replace them and spend the money to do that. So this is the kind of rudimentary start of what we call a cislunar economy. And NASA, of course, is doing it. There's a lot of science that NASA is doing or planning to do. And so it's just this whole thing being brought together. So the South Pole is a very, very important region, but it's somewhere we haven't been before, and that's where we have to take all the precautions.
When you say water or ice on the moon, I'm assuming it's not contaminated, it's not radioactive, it's just regular frozen water, and do we know that?
Well, that's a very good question. We know that there's water from various overflights, from satellites and so on. And obviously, you're not just going to take a handful of it and swallow it. So there will be a lot of tests on it. But again, I don't expect it to be radioactive because it's not really seeing the sunlight, and I don't think that would be an issue. The contaminants is interesting. We were not really expecting any biological contaminants, but lunar dust, for instance, is a real hazard for astronauts. It's very, very fine and can cause problems if you breathe it in. So of course you want to make sure that there's no residue of that in the water. It probably won't do you any harm from the point of view of ingesting it, but it might do you harm because of how small and sharp it is. In other words, it could do damage to your lungs. So obviously you're not just going to drink it, but the idea might be to distill it, sublimate it, and then condense it into separate hydrogen and oxygen that then can be used for other purposes.
Dr. David Alexander with us for a couple more minutes, director of the Rice Space Institute, talking about the Artemis II that was delayed till March, I guess. What is the status of the American flag that we left behind from the Apollo missions? Is that still red, white, and blue and still there?
Well, it's still there. I think we've seen some of the sites. We actually just had a talk from the Apollo 16 astronaut Charlie Duke a couple of weeks ago, and he helped plant one of those flags. And so it's hard to see. I think the flags we can see the rover, we can see the landing, the lens, so on from the Apollo era. We expect that because of the radiation and the sunlight, we expect the flags to essentially have been bleached. So I don't expect them to be red, white, and blue, but they are still there, and they are still representative of that great space age that kind of America led the way to the moon.
Yeah. So Artemis II takes the astronauts around. Artemis III, what's the schedule for that? And that's the landing. And how long are the astronauts planning on staying on the moon for that one?
So that's the $1 million question, or actually a several $1 billion question. But the hope is, and we've a new administrator in, and there's obviously a lot of competition from China. They've announced plans to get to the moon by maybe 2030, 2032. So the push is for the U.S. to get there if we can, by 2028. The complication is the landing system, the human landing system. And so there's some delays with, if you follow the news on this, SpaceX and Starship was the kind of chosen. There was two companies chosen to support the human landing, Blue Origin being one and SpaceX being the other. And SpaceX's Starship was scheduled to be the one that did the early Artemis missions, the landings. And they're a little bit behind schedule. They're hoping to have a flight, I think, in the next 3 months, and we'll see where we are there. They've had some notable successes, the chopstick landing, for example. But just to accelerate that process, instead of waiting to 2032, 2034, NASA, the second company that was supposed to do the later Artemis missions, like 4 and 5 and so on, Blue Origin with the New Glenn rocket and their lander there, they've been asked to accelerate their development of that system, and so Blue Origin is now focusing a little bit more. They're reducing their low Earth orbit flights to focus a little bit more on their landing system. And so the idea is that if one of them, if they can get everything working, it's always difficult, but if they can get everything working smoothly, we've now got two companies pushing to give us that capability, try and accelerate the timeline. 2028 is a very ambitious challenge, but all we can do is try, and so that's the goal. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if that slipped.
David, Dr. David Alexander, last question for you. Apollo, Greek mythology, right? Who is Artemis? Who is Artemis?
Artemis is a twin sister of Apollo.
Yeah.
And so the change from then to now is that back in the Apollo days, of course, it was fighter pilots. We needed that skill set for decision making under pressure and all those hand-eye coordination. And in those days, for instance, women were not allowed to be fighter pilots, so therefore they couldn't be astronauts. The astronaut corps these days is very, very broad. people from different backgrounds, even some astrophysicists occasionally. But there's a lot of people from the different backgrounds, and so that kind of Artemis switch kind of represents how space has changed in terms of, making it a little bit more accessible. I mean, all these people are very skilled, don't get me wrong,
sure.
But it's making it bringing people with different sets of skills and not just the pilot skills into play. And that helps us with the science, it helps us with the protection of the crew, and it helps us in so many other ways.
Dr. David Alexander, a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much for bringing it down to our level. Director of the Rice Space Institute, Dr. David Alexander. We reserve the right to call you back whenever we need you. Thank you very much, sir. Interesting conversation. Good luck.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me on.
You got it. America at Night, back in a moment.
From the heart of America, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, there is a new book out. Came out, in the last month or so. It's called The Most Awful Responsibility, Truman and the Secret Struggle for Control of the Atomic Age. Alex Wellerstein wrote that book, and we are going to talk with him next hour. So stick around for that. An interesting conversation about how, what, when, why, who knew, why did they know, how did it happen? All of those things. He looks back after 70 years and draw some interesting conclusions. So that's coming up next hour. And then hour number 3 is open phones. Our last guest talked about the spending with NASA for the Apollo missions. That's where Silicon Valley came from, right? Stanford, UC Berkeley, the quest to make things smaller and smaller to fit in a space capsule, the Apollo missions, NASA research, all of those things. It was the massive, massive, massive government spending to send humans to the moon is what then created everything else. You don't have that massive money being spent by the federal government in the 50s and 60s and 70s. That leads to Apple and Microsoft and iPhones and PayPal and all of that, right? All derives from that government spending on the space mission. Stay right there. We're just getting started. Our executive director tonight is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven. And this is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, don't forget the text line is alive and well, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. And, of course, phone calls and text messages. Text messages whenever you want. Phone calls next hour, America Tonight. This hour, we're going to dive into a conversation with a man who has looked back at the dropping of the American bomb in Nagasaki and Nagasaki and the other ones escaped me for a second. It is considered, right, the most important decision of the 20th century to drop an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, thank you, and Nagasaki. Right? And what was Truman thinking? And what did we know? And when did we know it? Because if you remember, right, he was the vice president of the United States, and when FDR died, they brought Harry Truman in and told him about the bomb. Did he know what it was? Did he know what they had? And then, once the war was over, we, for a very brief time, had the bomb, and nobody else had the bomb. And they were advising Harry Truman, while we have it, let's use it for world domination. And he said, no, we're not going to do that. So this conversation is about, the book is The Most Awful Responsibility, Truman and the Secret Struggle for the Control of the Atomic Age. And the author is Alex Wellerstein. The book just came out. It's getting a whole lot of attention. And so we are going to check in with him. It is looking forward to a fascinating conversation with him. The book just came out. And if you ever have a chance to go and visit the Harry Truman home and his presidential library in Independence, Missouri, right outside of Kansas City, do yourself a favor. Take the day, take the time, go and see for yourself, because it is extraordinary. It is a day you will never forget. Stay right there. The Most Awful Responsibility, Truman and the Secret Struggle for the Control of the Atomic Age. America at Night. Back in a moment.
Coming to you from the heart of the nation, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Let's get right to it. Our next guest is an associate professor of science and technology studies at the Stevens Institute of Technology. He is taught at Harvard and MIT and Georgetown, and he is the author of a brand new book. The book is called The Most Awful Responsibility, Truman and the Secret Struggle for the Control of the Atomic Age. Alex Wellerstein, welcome to America at Night.
Thank you so much. Really pleased to be here.
Before we talk about the book, I have to talk about your side hustle, and that is this thing that you're known for online. You're the inventor and the creator of something called Nuke Map. What is Nuke Map, and it's strangely compelling?
Nuke Map is a website that lets you see the effects of a nuclear weapon detonated anywhere in the world, any weapon you want, any settings you want, and you can see how it would impact any city, yours, somebody else's. It's up to you.
It's pretty disturbing. What was the idea behind it? You just wanted to show people how devastating the atomic bomb would be?
It's, I think, really hard for most people to think concretely about nuclear weapons, and there isn't just one atomic bomb. And so the website is a way for people to calibrate their understanding, is one way to think about it. They're both probably bigger than you expect, but also maybe not as big as you expect. So finding the sort of sweet spot in there is, I think, an important thing to take these weapons seriously.
Yeah, nukemap.com. Let's talk about the book, The Most Awful Responsibility. Harry Truman, right? It fell on his shoulders. What did you find out? What was the impetus? What was the energy to write the new book about this?
So this is a new book on Truman and the bomb, covering his entire presidency, not just World War II, but about a third of its World War II. And my argument is that Truman was a much more anti-nuclear president than I think people realize. He was deeply disturbed by the idea of using nuclear weapons after World War II. He considered it an almost evil thing.
And so, what is that very well known? I mean, I thought we knew everything that there was to know about Truman and the bomb.
I don't think so. I think there are sort of two versions of Truman and the bomb out there. One is Truman made this terrible decision, but he needed to do it, and it was okay, and he was all right with that. And the other is a more, Truman is setting off the Cold War kind of guy. My Truman is neither of those Trumans. It's the basic idea is that during World War II, Truman was not just
further out of the loop than most people realize, but I think he fundamentally misunderstood some aspects about what was going to happen. And the consequence of that was that in the period after World War II, he was, in fact, quite dubious about using nuclear weapons and quite disturbed by the fact that they, in his words, were weapons that slaughtered and murdered women and children. These are his words. And that had a big impact on early U.S. nuclear policy.
The book is The Most Awful Responsibility, Truman and the Secret Struggle for the Control of the Atomic Age. Alex Wellerstein is our guest. So, FDR dies, Truman takes power, and is it true he had no idea when they were telling him what they had, right? I mean, the story goes how much did he know and how much did anybody really know what they just created?
There were a few people who knew, but Truman really knew very little. He had not been told anything about the bomb by Roosevelt. He got his first real briefing on the history of the atomic bomb and all their plans only a couple weeks after he became president. And the briefing is pretty short. I mean, it's about a 45-minute briefing when there's only so much you can communicate in 45 minutes. I think that Truman understood that this was an interesting possibility. I'm not sure whether he took it as seriously as somebody who had been more connected to it would. I mean, imagine you've become president, and on nearly your first day, one of your cabinet members comes to you and says, we're building a science fiction weapon which will totally change the world, and it's never going back again, and we might kill everybody if we don't do it right. And that's essentially what Truman was told in the beginning. I think he would have a little healthy Missouri skepticism about those kinds of claims before it was tested.
Yeah, and is it true that they made the 3, and then they had a hard time making the 4th, and it took a while for the next round of bombs to sort of be created?
Well, actually, so they tested one in New Mexico in July. They dropped one on Hiroshima in August 6th, and they dropped another on Nagasaki on August 9th. The next bomb would have been ready about a week later. And in fact, Truman was told this on August 10th, that the next bomb would be ready to drop on Japan in 7 days. And Truman's response was to order that no more nuclear bombings could happen without him being explicitly asked. And he told his cabinet meeting, this is the morning on August 10th, that the reason he did that was because he could not stand the thought of killing another 100,000 people, particularly, this is a quote, all those kids. And that's a very, I think, important sentiment. Truman told his cabinet that he stopped the atomic bombings because of his deep concern with the casualties. Again, this is not the normal Truman that we sort of get, but I think it's actually reflective of how he felt about it.
Yeah. Conventional wisdom, as for the reasons why, right, was we would save a lot of lives. And as tragic as it is, we wouldn't have to invade Japan. We wouldn't have to spend another 18 months, 2 years trying to, hand-to-hand combat to get to Tokyo. And that this would help save lives. True or false?
I mean, in retrospect, one can make that argument for sure. That isn't how they were thinking about it before they used it. That was an argument developed to justify using it. There were really very little arguments for why they needed to use it that were circulating before it was used, because pretty much everyone involved in that decision-making process assumed they were going to use it one way or the other. They didn't really see it as a decision that needed to be defended. It's only after you've done it, and there are a lot of casualties and there's controversy, that the story of, well, we did it to save lives became the justification. They had many reasons for thinking that using it was going to be a good idea. The idea that it might shorten the war, sure, that's one of them.
What about the theory that Russia was about to get into the war and America didn't want to share the spoils with Russia, and so we have to end this quick so Russia doesn't get involved?
There is some evidence that some people in that upper echelon, Truman's cabinet, those people, saw that as an additional reason to maybe hope that the atomic bomb could end the war quickly. I don't think it was the primary reason. I think they had lots of reasons for wanting them. And just to give you an example of another reason, why would somebody like Robert Oppenheimer, who has no great interest in killing people and is really not thinking in big strategic terms, why does he want to use the bomb? One reason is if you make the weapons in World War II seem really awful, maybe that lets you skip World War III. Maybe that makes it so that the next war is not an atomic war. My point is just there's lots of reasons. The people who were making these decisions, they basically saw all upside to using the bomb. They didn't see any real reasons not to. They were generally not that concerned about Japanese casualties, for example.
Why did they pick the two places they picked?
So this is actually a pretty large part of the book. There were essentially criteria set up for what kind of target would this bomb be most effective on. And the conclusion was it should be a city that would be the best to showcase the kind of power of this bomb. It should be a city that has not been bombed yet and should be of the right size so that it really looks impressive. And ideally, it would be a city with some kind of military or industrial machinery in it that you could point to as why you chose that city. But they're very clear it was a psychological. The ultimate goal was to scare the Japanese. It wasn't that that was the only way to destroy a military base or a factory. From that criteria, they came up with a short list, which was essentially Kyoto, Hiroshima, Kokura, and Niigata. The Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, vetoed Kyoto. That's usually a footnote. I think it's actually very important to the story of this. That he's eventually successful and gets Truman to agree to veto Kyoto. That makes Hiroshima the number one. They end up needing to add another target, Nagasaki, so that they have a backup target. And so that's the sort of a condensed version of the story. But this whole question of targets, especially the Kyoto, that's a very core part of the book.
Why? It's interesting. Without going through the whole book, that's why people need to buy The Most Awful Responsibility by Alex Wellerstein, Truman and the Secret Struggle to Control the Atomic Bomb. That's interesting. Why would they knock Kyoto off the list?
The Secretary of War had complicated and probably ultimately personal reasons. He had been to Kyoto. I think that isn't quite all of what goes into it. I think he felt at some level that that was his way to do some good in the war, is to preserve this cultural touchstone of Japan. The interesting thing here is that the military did not 100% accept that the Secretary of War had the authority to do that, to make that decision. And so they kept trying to put Kyoto back on the target list about a dozen times. And the final time was right before they finalized the strike orders. So this is when Stimson and Truman are at the Potsdam Conference in Germany. And Stimson's reaction was to go to Truman and to see if he could get him to agree to take Kyoto off the list, because the military would respect that. And this is the only decision that Truman, that we know that Truman actually made about the bomb. He was never asked, should we drop the bomb? It was just assumed. But this was the only place where Truman himself got involved in agreeing to one option over another, which was not to bomb Kyoto and instead to bomb Hiroshima. My argument in the book is that he may not have totally understood that conversation and may have misunderstood that Hiroshima was a city. I'm not sure Truman understood that. So anyway, if that sounds surprising, I don't doubt anybody, but that's what the book in part is about, and I try to give all the evidence for it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Alex Wellerstein is a professor. He has taught at Harvard and MIT, and his newest book is called The Most Awful Responsibility, Truman and the Secret Struggle for Control of the Atomic Age. The book came out in December of last year. Was there any warning? Did they give any type of warning to Japan saying, this is coming, this is your last chance?
They very deliberately did not give any warning. The whole gambit that this bomb would shorten the war was to shock Japan. And they not only didn't want to warn because that would decrease the shock, but it might cause Japan to undertake defensive measures that would make it harder to use the bomb. So the closest they came to a warning is in the Potsdam Declaration, which was issued in July 1945. They essentially warned that if Japan did not surrender, it would suffer a reign of ruin, but it was already suffering a reign of ruin. It was already under aerial bombardment practically every day. So there was no actionable warning in there, and very deliberately not one. After Hiroshima, they did prepare warning leaflets that said, look at what we've done. We might drop this on another city soon, etc. Interestingly enough, because of a lot of mishaps, and this was not coordinated with the bombing in any way, Nagasaki did get warning leaflets, but it got them the day after it was bombed.
Oh, my goodness. Alex Wellerstein, I got about a minute. We're going to take a break and then come back with the second segment. But there's a scene in the Robert Oppenheimer movie where Robert Oppenheimer goes into the Oval Office and Harry Truman, the character, turns to him and says, get this, whatever he says, get this weak-kneed man out of here. I'm the one who has to make the decision. Did that scene actually happen?
That meeting happened, and it clearly went badly. Though exactly what was said and why it was said is, I think, the trickier part. I think that the movie gives a fairly okay version of how Oppenheimer might have perceived that meeting, but I don't think that's probably how Truman perceived it.
Interesting. All right, Alex Wellerstein. The book is The Most Awful Responsibility, probably the most consequential decision of the 20th century, dropping the atomic bomb on 2 Japanese cities. We'll come back and talk more with Alex. The book is The Most Awful Responsibility, out last month. Back in a moment, America at Night.
This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Welcome to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
We're back on America at Night. The book is called The Most Awful Responsibility, Truman and the Secret Struggle for the Control of the Atomic Age. Alex Wellerstein is our guest. I want to get to afterwards, but still about the decision, Alex. And you were mentioning Potsdam. While in Potsdam, right, they're there, and they're carving up Europe. Stalin, Churchill has to leave in the middle of Potsdam because he's voted out as prime minister. Does Truman tell the other Allied leaders, including Stalin, about the bomb?
So Churchill already knew about the bomb because he'd known about it with Roosevelt. He had been one of the British were a key partner in building the bomb. So he knew all about it. He knew much more than Truman really did about it. There was a big question about what Truman should tell Stalin. There were a number of people who said, you should tell him something because it would be a little, at the minimum rude to use a super weapon without telling your ally, but, potentially diplomatically disastrous. And so what Truman does is he goes up to Stalin at one point during the conference, and he says something along the lines of, we're building a new weapon, that might end the war, and we're planning to use it on Japan. And Stalin says, great, and doesn't seem interested. And he never tells Stalin it's an atomic bomb. Truman walks away from that interaction thinking he doesn't know what I'm talking about. What fun. The reality is we now know that Stalin had spies in the project from very early on and had known about the bomb longer than Truman had and knew exactly what Truman was referring to. And he went back to his people and he said, their test must have been successful. And, here we are. So that's the sort of story of it. Truman thought he told Stalin something new, but in reality, he sort of indicated something else to Stalin that he sort of indicated that he wasn't willing to tell Stalin what was going on.
How close was the Soviet Union and Russia to the bomb at that point?
The Soviet Union and Russia were nowhere close to a bomb at that point. They had been unable to allocate the resources during World War II to making a bomb. What they had was a small program that was in sort of preparation for a bomb program. So scouting out resources, figuring out experiments to do, getting uranium, and also collecting and collating all of the foreign intelligence they were getting from the United States and other places even. So they were in the position so that right after the war ended, they could start a bomb project. And it took them about 5 years before they tested.
After Potsdam, Harry Truman gets on a boat and heads back to America. Is it true while on that boat, unable to communicate with anybody off the boat, because in 1945 there was no texting or any type of phone or satellite phones or anything like that? Is it true that Harry Truman told the traveling press that we're about to drop a bomb, and they knew before it happened, but they couldn't tell anybody?
I don't know if he actually told them. This is one of those stories that journalists sometimes tell, and not a present company accepted. I'm always a little suspicious of journalist gossip of this sort. I would say they did have ways of communicating with the land, but they were somewhat constrained. They had radio. They had means of doing these things. They weren't completely isolated. He certainly told them after the bomb was used. He went and announced to them, and he was completely thrilled, and it was very exciting, and he wanted to get back. This was, again, before any discussion of casualties or the degree of damage or anything like that had been received.
Interesting. Okay, so the first one goes off, and is it what they expected? What is Truman told? And does that begin to shape his sort of post-war thinking?
So the first bomb goes off, and Truman is told that it went well. He doesn't have any details at first. So they release a statement under Truman's name, which had been prepared before, and Truman had not written it. And they inserted Hiroshima into the blank spot on the statement. And it was essentially, they said it was about the same as the test in July, which is about right. It was a little smaller. There's no more information out of Japan or the Army for a couple days because the amount of the bombing itself disrupted internal Japanese communications. The Japanese want to send scientists to check it out before they say anything about it and make sure it was really an atomic bomb. The Americans are trying to survey it from the air, but there's so much smoke from the fires that they can't even get pictures. I mean, they know it was a lot of fire, but they don't know exactly what. The exact the first day that Truman or anyone else had anything like an assessment of what had actually happened there is not until August 8th. That morning is when the Japanese report that there's hundreds of thousands potentially of casualties, that the city is 60% destroyed. And it's also when the Army Air Forces are able to get pictures of the city from the air. And we know that Truman is briefed on these pictures and on these casualties on the morning of August 8th. And this is the first time, I think, that he definitely would have understood, if he didn't at that point, that Hiroshima was a city and that there were massive civilian casualties.
He was, as you mentioned, right, a Missouri strong, plain spoken. I don't want to say simple-minded, but very very old school, but also very moral and very ethical. And did that weigh on him? Did that change him after he saw this first bomb? How did that change him after this first bomb?
I think you're right. I mean, Truman is an interesting character. He's the last president who did not have a college education, but he was driven by these very strong sort of civic values, I think you could say. And yeah, I think the death of, as he would put it, women and children is always his term that he used throughout his life for essentially non-combatants. I think he felt that was not a good thing, that those weighed on him. And he described, again, his language for talking about nuclear weapons after August 8th, 1945, is generally one about how terrible they are. It's a word he uses all the time, terrible, about how they slaughter, how they murder, how they kill the civilian population. Not positive. If somebody was using that language today, you would say this person is anti-nuclear, they don't like nuclear weapons. Again, not what we normally associate Truman with. So I think it did weigh on him quite a bit. He also always defended the bombing, to be sure. I think he felt that it was his civic responsibility to always defend the honor of the United States and things like that. But I think that at some level, he found them really terrible. And he told people in private conversations throughout the rest of his presidency, we have diary entries for this, that his goal is to never use these weapons again.
Alex Wellerstein is our guest. The book is The Most Awful Responsibility, Truman and the Secret Struggle for Control of the Atomic Age. It came out in December. You know, we take it for granted now that the atomic bomb is taken out of the military's hands and into the civilian hands, right? The President of the United States makes that ultimate decision. But back then, how revolutionary was that idea?
This was a very contested concept, and Truman is largely responsible for why we think of this as a political weapon, a civilian-controlled weapon, and not just another military weapon. So Hiroshima happens. Truman learns about the casualties a couple days later. You might say, well, didn't he order a second bomb to be used? He was not even told ahead of time that Nagasaki was about to happen. I'm not sure he was aware that another bomb was going to be ready a couple days after the first. He had very bad information about the schedule of bombings. August 10th is when he orders that the bombings be stopped. And from that point onward, he hoarded the power to use nuclear weapons in the presidency, makes it official American policy that nobody but the president is authorized to use nuclear weapons. And that's not because he wants them to be used. It's the opposite. It's because he doesn't trust the military not to use them. He puts them in the hands of the president so that they won't become regular weapons. I think that's an interesting move and not really what we usually associate with that kind of division.
Yeah. I guess the unanswerable question is if Japan doesn't surrender after the second one, would he have used another one? And what would he have done if they didn't surrender?
It's a really good question. Of course, we can't know, but I will say that on the day that Japan surrendered, Truman had a meeting with the British ambassador, and he told him, and this is in the ambassador's account, he was incredibly depressed, and he felt like if Japan did not accept the surrender terms, he was going to have to authorize the use of another atomic bomb on them. The surrender notice came a little bit later that day, so it did not occur, but it does suggest that he was open to the possibility, but extremely unhappy by it. What would have actually happened, we don't know. There were different ideas floating around, mostly in military circles at the time. Some people said, let's just keep going down that list we have. Some people said, let's maybe just attack Tokyo. Let's just do it. And then some people, including Chief of Staff General Marshall, said, what if we saved up 4 or 5 bombs and then used them during the invasion, use them to clear out whole areas and sort of treated them not as a psychological weapon, but as a more of a regular military weapon. Whether Truman would have gone with any of those, it's unclear.
Alex Wellerstein, I've had an opportunity to go to the Truman Library, one of the most fascinating days. And I would recommend anybody going to the Truman Library and the Truman House in Independence, Missouri, just outside of Kansas City. But for me, when I was there, I was enjoying it, and I turned the corner, and hanging on the wall is a handwritten note by Harry Truman, and basically it says, okay, drop the bomb. And a shiver went down my spine to see the actual note. Have you seen that? I mean, tell me your thoughts when you see that.
I've seen it. I would note that it's not drop the bomb. What it is you can release the press release saying we use the bomb when you're ready to. And that's about the closest we have to something that looks like Truman acknowledging or giving an order or something. And I just think it's interesting that it's actually one step removed. It's approving a press release, The press release says we just used an atomic bomb, and he's been told the bomb is going to be dropped on Hiroshima, in the next day or so. But I think that's kind of amazing that, like, again, there's no piece of paper where Truman says drop the bomb. He isn't really in that. It's not a decisive positive order of that sort. The way that the head of the project, General Groves, put it is that Truman's role was basically non-interference, that there were other people making decisions, and Truman sort of went along with the plans.
The most awful responsibility, Truman and the secret struggle for the control of the atomic age. Alex Wellerstein, we got just a couple minutes left. I don't think we ever came really close again to dropping another bomb. And, I mean, maybe we could sort of argue and debate in how much we know and don't know. But we haven't. The United States is the only country that did. Harry Truman is the only one who ever gave the answer. How has he shaped the last 70 years and the atomic bomb age?
I think that Truman obviously is incredibly important for a couple of reasons. One is he is the president who is in charge when the bombs were dropped. And again, whatever his direct role or knowledge was, he would have 100% taken responsibility for that. The buck stops here. He really believed that. He never tried to push responsibility onto anybody else. But I also think he deserves some credit for the fact that we haven't used nuclear weapons. There was a period from 1945 to 1949 in which the United States was the only country in the world that had nuclear weapons. And even for many years after that period, there are ways in which it could have used nuclear weapons without fearing retaliation, because the Russians, for example, did not have ways of getting the bombs to the United States and would not have been able to do that. And they didn't do that. And so a large part of the end of the book is talking about why nuclear weapons don't get used in the Korean War, because it wasn't a question of will be retaliated against. It's not mutually assured destruction, because there is no mutual. There's no way for it to happen back to us in kind. And there were people who discussed maybe we should use them. There were people in the military who thought maybe this would help us in our fighting this war. Those discussions never got that far, in part because by that point, Truman had made it very clear to all of his advisors that he was not going to use nuclear weapons. But I think that you could imagine if another different person was president, even some people, if Eisenhower had been president a little earlier than he was, he might have been more open to the idea of the atomic bomb as a usable weapon under certain circumstances.
Yeah, you have to wonder what Thomas Dewey would have thought about it, right? Alex Wellerstein, if you had a chance to ask Harry Truman a question about this, what would you have wanted to have asked him?
Oh, that's a really hard question. That's a really good one. I don't know if I would have asked him. I guess I would have asked him here's the thing, and this comes down to the subject of the book. Do I trust Harry Truman's memory of his own decisions and his own feelings? And the answer is generally not. I don't trust his memoirs. I don't trust him after the fact. One of the interesting things about him is throughout the rest of his life, people asked him, when exactly did you make the decision to use the bomb? And he couldn't give one answer. He couldn't pinpoint it because it was clear that he never made a single decision to use the bomb. So he sort of invented meetings or invented situations. And again, the closest I think he comes to doing that is this decision about Kyoto. But even that's not quite the decision to use the bomb. So I think less me wanting to ask a question. I would love to spend time just talking with him about it. My experience is that if you spend an hour or so talking with people about anything, it helps you get inside their head more than any substance of their answers, just the way they approach them, the facial expressions, things like that. I guess if I had one question, it would be to ask him whether or not he thinks in another world he would have wanted to ban nuclear weapons, because I think he actually did want this. That didn't end up being what could happen, and I think he practically, but I think he was more interested in that than he gets any credit for.
The Most Awful Responsibility, a brand new book, The Most Awful Responsibility, Truman and the Secret Struggle for the Control of the Atomic Age. Alex Wellerstein. The book just came out. It's going to hit all sorts of bestseller lists. It's just getting started. Alex, thank you very much for a wonderful, fascinating hour. Be safe and good luck on the tour.
Thank you so much.
America at Night. Back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Stay right there. We've got open phones next hour, plus your text messages. As for Savannah Guthrie's mom, Pima County Sheriff still saying today they don't know where she is, and she was taken from her home. They're also asking for privacy and a strange comment from one of their neighbors who lives in the neighborhood for 50 years, said that her security camera captured a black bear near her house 3 different times. One of the times was just before sunrise. She said the bear got close enough to her house that he tripped over the lights and the camera. Does that mean anything? I don't know. Who knows? But people are looking for any type of information. So we'll see how it all turns out. Keep a good thought. Stay right there. Open phones next hour. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
All right, we're back. And the phone numbers are ready to roll. We got open phones tonight. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-47. 29. Couple of topics tonight that we hit on. We talked to Chris Tomlinson, columnist for the Houston Chronicle, talking about the special election in Texas and the Senate race. This is probably one of the most watched Senate races, this John Cornyn versus Ken Paxton in the Republican primary. And then have got the Democratic Party. You've got the two sides beating each other up depending on who gets in. It should be a safe Republican seat, but if Ken Paxton gets in, who knows? If Jasmine Crockett gets in, who knows? It could be a pretty interesting race. And then, of course, everybody pointing to that special state Senate seat that the Democrat beat the Republican by 14 points. I don't see that as anything other than a one-off, because it was a runoff of a runoff. And it was a Saturday. It was the only ballot. It was the only race on the ballot. There was an ice storm that suppressed some of the voting earlier in the week. They're going to have to do it again. This is just to fill out the term of the last guy. And so they're going to meet again in the general election where more people are going to go and vote. So I don't see that as any big deal. Then we talked about this Artemis II rocket that's headed to the moon with Dr. David Alexander, who was a professor at Rice University. That was fantastic. And then, of course, last hour, we had the conversation about the atomic bomb and the dropping of the atomic bomb with Harry Truman. And I don't know about you, but that was a fascinating conversation. So many tentacles, right? So many things we now know, so many things we still don't know about the most consequential decision of the 20th century, which was to drop the atomic bomb by Harry Truman, not once, but twice. So that's what we talked about. But, of course, anything we can talk about. The Jeffrey Epstein story is not going away. President Clinton apparently has, it was on again, it was off again. Now I guess it's on again. Both Bill and Hillary are going to testify. Hillary Clinton has said that she's never talked to the man, never met the man. So I don't know what she's going to testify on. As for President Clinton, he said that he's never been to the island and that he used his plane a couple of times. Who knows what he knows? But again, I think this is going to backfire. This is the Republicans, I guess, trying to get a pound of flesh out of the Democrats. And who better than to haul the Clintons in to a deposition in the House Oversight Committee, but you're going to turn around and do it to Trump and his sons and his daughters. And what do you, I mean, right? This is, I don't know if this makes any sense. And what if Clinton, just bear me out for a second. What if Clinton were to go into this meeting and just sing a song? Oh, you know what? I was with Jeffrey Epstein this one time, and he told me Trump did X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z. Right? I mean, Clinton could just either make it up or tell the truth and have some wild story come out, and all of a sudden now you've got this matzo ball hanging out here, and what happens now? I also got to tell you that I was never a Jeffrey Epstein follower of the story. I mean, I thought it was a fringe story. I thought it was, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I still can't believe the most salacious allegations. But I got to tell you, there's something that just doesn't smell right with this thing. But I have to admit, I am late to the party on this. But there's just something that makes very little sense to me. And I don't know if you want to spend the whole hour talking about it, because every time I talk about it, I feel like I have to take a shower, because it is so disgusting and so awful and so heartbreaking. But all these people's names that are attached to the Epstein files, Trump, Clinton, Steve Tisch, Robert Kraft now, Elon Musk, the guy who directed the Milani movie, the guy who's running the Olympics for L.A., right? I mean, all these people, Bill Gates, all these people who have some type of connection to Jeffrey Epstein, they're all innocent. They're all innocent. All of them are innocent. Anyone who's in these files, you ask them, oh, we're innocent. We didn't know. We didn't see. Somebody, Prince Andrew, right? Somebody did something. Somebody did something terrible. They trafficked these poor women to somebody. So the question is, who are the men? If none of these men are the men that are guilty, then who are the men that are guilty? How come we know all the men who are innocent, but we don't know any of the men who are guilty? It's really bizarre. And then Bill Gates. I'm sorry. You try singing this. You try peddling this story once you come home. A dear friend of yours writes an email to himself saying, oh, hey, by the way, you know my friend Bob? My friend Bob got a sexually transmitted disease because these women that we were hanging out with. And we got to figure out a way to slip some penicillin into his wife's drink so she doesn't find out. And then your friend, all of a sudden, or your wife finds out about this email that your friend wrote to himself about you, about how you contacted a sexually transmitted disease. And this man talks about how you had to take penicillin and how you tried to figure out a way to slip me the penicillin. Now, if you were to go to your wife and say, okay, that story's just not true. That guy, that friend of mine, I don't really know him. I don't know what he's talking about. That's just not true. Just a show of hands. How many wives would buy that story? I mean, seriously? How many? Oh, yeah, no, I know your friend. Yeah. No, I could see him just writing an email to himself and making that up. Yeah, I could see that. Why do we believe it? Because it's Bill Gates. But any other man in the universe trying to sell that story to his wife, you're out on your ear, buddy. There's not a woman alive who would buy that story. My friend just wrote that email to himself. He made it up. It's not true. How was that possible? 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. All right, look, we got a couple lines open. I was rambling. I was babbling. Hold that thought. We'll take a break. Matt in Roseburg, Oregon. You'll be first up when we come back. Text lines are coming in. We'll also take more phone calls. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. America at Night. Stay right there. Give us a call. Text in. Back in a moment.
Join the conversation. Call 844-2-McGraw. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Call 844-2-McGraw and be a part of the conversation on America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
All right, let's get to the phones. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Matt in Oregon. Hello.
Hi. McGraw, I was listening to the talk about Truman. There's a book written in the early 1970s. It was a bestseller. And it's an oral biography, and the author is Merle Miller. But in that book, he asks Truman questions, and that was one of the questions as to when he knew about the bomb. Truman in that book says he knew about it when he was a senator. He didn't know every detail, but he was the chairman of a committee investigating waste when he was a senator, and they found all this money going someplace that nobody could figure out what the hell it was. And so he started pushing that, and the Secretary of War came to him and told him to back off, that there's this special weapon that's in it. And
Right.
that was it.
As much as a senator,
it.
right? As much as a senator could know, type of deal.
Well,
of a
they're
secret
not going to
program.
tell him anymore. But
Yeah.
And then when he became vice president, Roosevelt did inform him of a special type of weapon. He didn't understand every detail. As he says in the book, he still doesn't understand every detail.
I don't think anybody really truly understood until they dropped it, what they actually had, right?
I'm not sure they understood, right. But he did know quite a bit, a lot more than the rumors, at least according to this book. And the book is the guy is asking him questions and he's talking back. You ought to it was a bestseller back then in the 70s.
Yeah.
And it's called Plain Speaking.
Yeah,
and,
I love Harry Truman for all sorts of reasons. And in some ways, our author was saying, Harry Truman's memory, Harry Truman's bravado, Harry Truman's memory, how much of that is, how much of that is accurate and not. And that's a legitimate question, right? What's in the papers? What's in the historical documents? Memories play tricks on people, obviously.
Would say he would start getting angry if he pushed it, because he kept saying, well, how much did you know? And finally pissed him off, Truman.
Yeah.
He said, I knew plenty, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore. He was real direct.
Yeah, interesting.
The other thing is on Oppenheimer, he referred to Oppenheimer as a crybaby.
Yeah.
As he said, what is he whining about? I'm the one who made the decision to drop the bomb, and get that crybaby out of here.
Yeah, that was depicted in the movie Oppenheimer. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Which is
a crybaby? I didn't see the movie.
Yes, he did. There's a great scene where Oppenheimer walks into the Oval Office. He makes a derogatory comment, very similar to what you just described.
Okay.
But the book Oppenheimer, the book is called Prometheus. It is a wonderful, wonderful book. The movie's very good, but of course the movie can't do justice to the book. The book, I believe, won a Pulitzer. The book was phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't read that book either.
Yeah. All right.
I've read a lot about Truman, and this is the This is the best one. If you ever get a chance, you should.
I will. I'll check it out. Hey, Matt,
one
thanks
other
for the phone
thing he
call.
brought
Yes,
up
go ahead.
his education. According to that, Truman, he didn't have a college education. But according to Truman, in that book, he read every book in the Independence Public Library.
I don't know,
including the encyclopedias.
Well, he was an avid reader. That's obvious.
He definitely was.
And just because you don't go to college doesn't mean you're not smart or intelligent or insightful or anything
Dean
else.
Acheson said he was one of the smartest people I ever knew. Acheson was his Secretary of State, who was a Harvard guy.
Had you ever read David McCullough's book, Truman?
Yeah.
Came out, I don't know, mid-'90s maybe. That also won a Pulitzer. And
he's probably my favorite president. So
he's and not to mention he left office with a 32% approval rating.
I know he didn't have much of, most of them don't, but he was real low.
But real low. And now he has, history 70 years later has done Harry Truman just fine. So people look at
he became real popular in the 70s. I'm 80 years old, so I go back and in the 70s,
that's why it's almost comical to sit here and judge Donald Trump. It's comical to sit here and judge Joe Biden because Harry Truman left with a 32% approval rating, and history's been very kind to Harry Truman. But at the time, he was considered an owned politician by the Pendergast machine in Kansas City, and he was a buffoon and didn't know what he was doing, and everybody walked all over him. But he created the Marshall Plan, recognized Israel, and put us on a path for the second half of the 20th century. Had to make a lot of decisions fast, and I think did a pretty good job doing it. So I
think he did too.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, thanks for the phone call. Appreciate it. Thanks for the comments. We got to go. Hey, the text line is officially open. Text your comments to 84126. That's 1-844-262-4729. 1-844-262-4729. A couple of text messages for you. Republicans are not in trouble in Texas. That's a lot of wishful thinking by Democratic pundits who want clicks for money. I agree. Windmills, they kill owls, hawks, and eagles. I don't know about that. The design of the arch was from a chain hung by two hands, then turned upside down. Yes, it was. Here's another one. If you want to know how Epstein got into the circle, I'm telling you, in the late 80s and 90s, it was through Ted Kennedy. I hung out at an estate with the younger Kennedy boys, seen them all the time, so I'll take Kennedy, Robert Jr., and Epstein and Maxwell. All right, good to know. And then this one, China is kicking our backside on renewable energies. That is a fact. The phone number is 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Text to that phone number or give us a call at that phone number, and we will continue with open phones. Eduardo in Tampa, Florida, hold that thought. We'll get back with you in just a moment. Oh, wait, I got another minute here. Let me... what can I do? I'm sorry, I read the clock wrong. This bottom of the hour break is killing me. I just want you to know. This network show is great, but the bottom of the hour hard break, I can't. I need more freedom. I'm in a box here. I don't know what I'm doing. Tomorrow on the program, can I tell you what's on the show tomorrow? We've got famed defense attorney Mark Garagos to talk to us about these Epstein files. And Frontline. Right, Frontline's got a story about the carpet industry and the toxic legacy of carpet. Also, just booked, Jonathan Horn from the Free Press writes a column about the American Revolution on the Free Press. He's been on the show a couple of times. We love having him on, so we're going to do a little history lesson with the American Revolution in honor of the 250th anniversary. That's tomorrow on the show. But open phones continue. Eduardo, I wanted to make sure you got plenty of time, so stick around. I'll give you plenty of time on the other side of the break. America at Night, back in a moment.
Coming to you from the heart of the nation, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. What's on your mind? Call 844-2-McGraw and be a part of America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
You got it. 1-844-2-McGraw. 1-844-262-4729. That's the phone number and also the text messages. And we love the text messages coming in. Let's see here. We've got Eduardo in Tampa, Florida. Eduardo, thanks for holding on. Welcome to America at Night.
Yeah, thank you, McGraw. I'm going to come back to that thing about people voting in the midterms. I think what I'm about to talk about. But I noticed similar stories here. On TV, I saw one in Japan where these young people were going in a restaurant. They were interviewing them, and they said they didn't have any friends. Another lady in Germany, she's like a DJ. Same thing, no friends because she's on social media. Even my temporary boss here in Tampa, I'm helping her out at a conference. She says when she gets back to Denver, she's going to join up a meetup. And the thing is, these young people are just addicted with this social media that there's no networking in person. You know, I mean, I went out of that way. I mean, when I was younger, I didn't know any people. And I moved to Tampa 2 years ago, and I networked, and I got around, went to events and all that, and I had more friends than 2 years ago. So, I mean, these young people, they need to get off this social media, and this is another reason why here in the U.S., the young people wouldn't come out to vote, particularly in midterms.
Look, Eduardo, you have hit on something that is destroying America from within. Yeah. And that is social media. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist or you don't need to be a psychiatrist to understand what's going on. Whether it's men, whether it's women, whether it's young teenagers, whether it's 6, 7, 8-year-olds, it is rotting their brain from the inside. Yep. Think about when we were kids, okay? If we got bullied at school, okay? We got bullied at school and it was bad. And then we went home and we either sat by ourselves, watched TV, watched a rerun of the Brady Bunch, or mom or grandma was there, and we had cookies and soda and we felt safe. Well, now a kid gets bullied at school. He goes home and he goes online and he's continued to be bullied. And then he continues to be made fun of. Then he goes to his whatever social media site and he sees his friends all at Sally's house having a good time. And he wasn't invited or she wasn't invited. And all of a sudden now, how come I wasn't invited? What's wrong with me? So they can't turn off their brain, right? They're being bombarded with this sort of what's wrong with me, and it's destroying them from the inside. They can't get away from it. They can't turn it off. Then, of course, you've got every pedophile known to man trying to talk them into taking their clothes off and taking pictures. Then when you do have a regular picture of them, Elon Musk creates a box which can then turn them into child pornography, and then they get shipped around all over the world. So, I mean, this is the world we're giving our children. And remember when Tipper Gore was upset with lyrics on rap songs, right? and now we trip over ourselves to give our kids a machine that has pedophiles. All they're trying to do is reach out and touch the children through the phone, known pedophiles and known scammers. I have a 5-year-old. I'm petrified to hand her a phone because this is the world where we're giving them, and nobody seems to care. It's unbelievable, Eduardo.
Yeah.
Sorry,
and remember
you
the
got
calculator?
me on a rant.
Yeah. remember the calculator, and look what happened with that.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking. I don't understand. So France apparently raided the offices of Twitter to find out more about this story of Twitter now creating this artificial intelligence software that can turn these pictures into pornography. Why aren't we trying to do that here? Right? I mean, you can't open a newspaper or click on a web page without somebody complaining about some book that's in the library that's inappropriate. Okay, all right, fine. But Twitter is much more readily available to teenagers, and it's much more dangerous. How come no one's complaining about Elon Musk? Why is he gets off scot-free, and somebody who put a book on a library shelf is being, vilified? It kind of doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
I hear you. Eduardo, are you touched a nerve? I apologize.
Well, thank you for listening to me, McGraw. Thank you. Great show. Okay.
Thank you for listening to me.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, good. Eduardo in Tampa. Tony in Montreal. Welcome to America at Night, Tony.
How you doing, McGraw? Can you hear me well?
I can hear you loud and clear, my friend.
McGraw, I just want to, I don't know where we're going with this. Like, last night I watched a little bit of these Emmys or Grammys, and people are making a lot of statements against the United States while they're being adored by the United States public, like Billie Eilish saying that, ICE out and all this nonsense, and then saying things like, anybody here is in the United States is on illegal land, so therefore anybody that's illegal should be able to stay here. So I read in the following uproar that the Mohav, I don't know, Nahav Basin tribe of Los Angeles Basin contacted her team and said, I'm glad that she brought the issue to the forefront that America is on stolen land, and she hasn't contacted us personally about the land that she owns that is our land, and we would like to speak to her about the land that she's occupying. And with the the undercurrent that she's occupying our land illegally, and maybe she should pay us. And they also said thank you for getting the word out worldwide that the land that America is now occupying is illegal land. Like, where are we going to go end up with this? Like, Billie Eilish, maybe she should pay some retribution to the Basin tribe of Los Angeles. I think that would be great. I think she should be the first person to donate maybe $5 million to the tribe, saying that, yes, I did pay for that land to some white settlers, but since I believe that we're all colonialists, I'll lead the charge and I'll pay $5 million and I'll make everybody happy. I think that would be great. I would be so impressed with her that she would put her money where her mouth is. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe this. How about getting
Tony, let me answer. Let me answer for you. Don't filibuster. Let's have a conversation. Here's my take on all this stuff. I didn't watch the Grammys because I don't know any of the music anymore. I don't know any of the acts. I don't know any of the. I'm 58 years old. The music has passed me by. But I am a Jets fan, okay? And I also, my daughter's mother, my fiance, we've been engaged twice, so we'll get married here one of these days. So she's officially my fiance. She's a nurse practitioner. So she's when we had our 5-year-old daughter, right, we got the full complement of vaccines, and we're very much pro-vaccine. I know that's like some type of political statement or whatever else, but sorry. I believe in vaccines. I believe in doctors. I believe in science, but whatever. So as a New York Jets fan, a year or so ago, or maybe 2 years ago now, 3 years ago, Aaron Rodgers became the quarterback of the New York Jets. So a lot of people came to me and they said, yeah, he's sort of anti-vaccine. And they came to me and they're like, well, what do you think now there, Mr. Lover of Vaccines? What do you think of your Jets quarterback who's Mr. Anti-Vax? And I was like, I didn't understand the visceral reaction. And I said, I'm rooting for Aaron Rodgers to be my quarterback. He's not my primary care physician. So I don't care what his philosophy is on vaccines. I don't go to him to be my doctor. So I find it fascinating that people watch the Grammys and Billie Eilish, if you like her music, fine, like her music, play it. But to take her political leanings and put any type of weight behind them is kind of ridiculous. She's just as dumb as you and I are. So who cares what she thinks about anything? Who cares what she thinks about ICE or not ICE? She's just another crazy voice in the wilderness. I don't understand. Every time a famous person brings up their political philosophy and, I can't watch him. He's a liberal. Oh, I don't like him. He is a conservative. Who cares? I'm watching him because he's a funny comedian. I'm rooting for Aaron Rodgers because he's a good quarterback. I want him to win. I don't care what he thinks about vaccines. I don't know. It just seems like we get all caught up in the wrong things. It just seems so weird. If you like Barbra Streisand's music, but you don't listen to it because you don't like that she's liberal, kind of doesn't make any sense to me.
So I love that you brought up the music because Billie Eilish is definitely not Three Dog Night, right?
I couldn't tell you one song she sings. I have no idea.
Well, let me tell you something. Some of her tunes are okay. You might be surprised at this. I studied concert piano for 10 years, so I like all kinds of music, and I love music. I love radio and I love music. But I'll just say this, you're mentioning Rogers and that. I wasn't too impressed because he lied about his vaccination issue. So I'm more apt to knock him for lying about his vaccination rather than him. Anybody that doesn't want to inoculate their kids for child mumps and measles and this, I don't think you're really thinking very straight.
Well, no, but I agree. But I don't. But again, he's free to do whatever he wants. Fine, just throw some more touchdowns for the Jets. That's all I care about.
I just think that Billie Eilish, I'm very impressed with her promoting the idea that she's living on illegal land and she has her foot in her mouth. And I'm hoping that she's going to donate all kinds of money to the indigenous tribes of America. I think that's great. I'm cheering her on, and I've got a big smile on my face because, we're all living on illegal land. So, next time I'm in St. Louis, I'm going to drop over to McGraw's house and say, hey, listen, you're in illegal land. We're all on illegal land. Maybe I'll stop over for some lasagna because I hear you got great lasagna.
I make a mean lasagna, Tony. I make a mean cast iron lasagna. I should get that recipe up on the website because I do make a mean lasagna. Tony, I got a break. It is America at Night. It's open phones, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. If I got time, I'll tell you a story about the Native Americans that will bring a tear to your eye. And it's a wonderful story. It's not very well known. I'll tell it next if we have time. America at Night, back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven, where the nation comes to talk. Join the conversation. Call 844-2-McGraw. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
All right, I have just enough time to tell this story. And I learned this story the last time I was in Ireland. And when I first heard this story, I just got a shiver and tears came to my eyes hearing this story, and I hope to do it justice. Anybody hear of the Trail of Tears? Beginning in the 1830s, the Choctaw Native American Indians were the tribe that was forced from their homes in southeastern the USA to Oklahoma under the government program. They were being transported, and they had to walk over 1,000 miles, forced walk. It was called the Trail of Tears because thousands ended up dying from exposure, starvation, disease. And they ended up in Oklahoma in the 1830s. And imagine the existence of these Choctaw Indians in Oklahoma in the 1830s after having left everything, walked 1,000 miles to Oklahoma in this land. Imagine how broke they were. Well, in the 1840s, the Choctaw Indians got word that the Irish were starving due to the famine. And the worst part of it was the 1845 to 1850, where 1 million Irish died of the famine. And the Choctaw Indians felt so bad for the Irish that they raised in their tribe $170, which is the equivalent of about $5,000 today. And they gave it to the Quakers. And the Quakers were then responsible for getting it to Ireland to help the Irish people. Now, oddly enough, other people found out about it. Prisoners in Sing Sing raised money for the Irish at that time. Slaves in the Caribbean raised money for the Irish at the time. But it was this Choctaw tribe in Oklahoma that raised $170, the equivalent of $5,000. And they sent it to the Irish and said, we hear you're starving, and we don't have much, but what we have, we will share it with you. And the Irish got through it, right? Fast forward to 2019. The Choctaw Indians are devastated by COVID, right? They don't have the health care. They don't have the doctors. They don't have the resources. Right? It's hard to stay away from each other. Simple masks didn't exist, right? You can only imagine what it was like living on a Indian reservation. And word got to the Irish that the Choctaw Indians were in dire need, sick and dying in record numbers because they could not fight off COVID-19. And the Irish said, this is our time to pay back our friends, the Choctaw Indians. And so the Irish held a fundraiser and at the time raised $1.8 million to help supply clean water, food, health supplies for Indian reservations all across America, including the Choctaw Indians. And the whole idea in Ireland was they came to our aid and our ancestors' aid when we needed them. What kind of human beings would we be if we couldn't help them out in their time of need? And so there is a monument in County Cork thanking the Choctaw Indians for their help during the Irish famine, and the Irish repaid that debt during COVID-19 and sent millions back to America to help out the Choctaw Indians. Now, if that story doesn't put a shiver down your spine and a tear in your eye, I don't think anything will. That's going to do it for us tonight. I thank you for listening. I thank you for checking in. I thank for the text messages. I thank for the calls. We are officially out of time. Alex Hinton is our executive director. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.